everyone. Thank you again. Welcome to our webinar today entitled 7 Ways to Secure Your Company's Documents and Data Now with Cloud Document Control. As I stated before, my name is Nicole Schmeida. I'm the marketing specialist here at Docuware, and I'll be moderating the session. The webinar will be presented by Nate Rouse, Regional Sales Director. You can see on the right today's agenda. For the first part of the session, Nate will cover, how does Docuware protect your data and documents? Then he'll go into a live demo, and at the end, we'll open it up for some Q&A. And with that now, I'm going to pass it off to Nate.
Good morning, everyone. I trust you can see my screen and the next slide in the process. So I wanted to say thank you for joining, certainly. And I wanted to throw out a little bit of a challenge this morning as we go through this. I would really encourage you to think about the content we provide or present today in light of some of these questions. Like, how really does our staff access information now? Are we looking in paper file cabinets? Are we checking our sent, deleted email kind of thing, doing a search in there? Is there maybe even another system involved, a line of business system where we've attached a bunch of stuff, or a network server that might have a couple folders people are storing things in? Well, we ultimately see a lot of times the answer to this question is not singular, that access to information today means we search in 2 or 3 or 4 different locations potentially before you find something. So I'd really ask you to think about that a little bit as we go through this. And maybe more importantly, if we find what we need in an analog world in the file cabinet on a piece of paper, do we know who actually accessed it? Do we have any ability or way to control an access point, or if allowed to access, a way to see what happened and when it happened? What protection do you really have in place? And the obvious one here is, disaster, complete data loss. But more and more a topic of concern that I'm hearing from our customers is, stuff sneaking out the back door. We have critical business information that we really don't want leaving the company. It might be proprietary, it might be special pricing information, whatever that might be. A leak can be just as potentially harmful as, a complete disaster. But what protection do we really have now today in place to handle any of that? How are we storing the documents? If an auditor walked in tomorrow, right, is it compliant? Would we meet all the regulatory requirements that we need to for a medical practice or a lending business or student information in a school? There's a lot of places where we're regulated and need to be compliant, whether it's to avoid fines or maintain certifications and licensing. And then how are we managing retention? In all reality, are we actually going back in January every year, digging through the boxes in the basement and purging the information that is not relevant, or is stuff maybe hanging out a little bit too long? And we'll take a peek at how we can do that kind of in Docuware. I get the question all the time, and really want to sum this up as simply as possible of what is Docuware good at? And this really is the answer. We are good at making things easy across 15-some thousand odd customers, 600,000 or 700,000 end users in, I lost count, 80, 90 countries. Our strength is making the system easy to use. It has to be very easy to store things. And when you go to access, it really has to be easy to find what you're looking for, from any device. We have mobile apps for your cellular type devices. Of course, browser based on a full computer, so it's very easy to use. But the key here is any device, any location, anywhere, in a fashion that doesn't require your staff and your company to drastically change how they're doing business. These are the areas we're going to look at today or talk about a little bit. Really suggest a centralized storage location from a strategy standpoint to eliminate the multiple places I have to go search to always find something. A digital filing system might even provide more benefits, but one central archive is a sound strategy. We'll look a little bit about how Docuware provides some tools to protect that most critical information, really from a standpoint of how do we control who can access and who can see it, and when they do, what has actually happened with it. There's also documents, though, that change. So, a secondary thing we'll look at, in addition to audit trails in Docuware, is version control, which is a little bit different scenario. We maybe don't need to see who opened the document or who printed it, but maybe need to see the history of the changes and the revisions that were performed, say on a pricing calculator in a spreadsheet, or perhaps a job description or a proposal in Microsoft Word. This is all obviously in an effort to meet compliance, right? Help support compliance and improve the business's access to information. We will take a peek at how Docuware can kind of keep on top of your old documents or your irrelevant documents for you. And of course, a small discussion or short discussion about audits and what capabilities we might have to simplify the audit and remove the dependency of your staff time finding things for the auditor, kind of thing. So to do this, I do have to frame it up a little bit from a technical perspective. It all starts with document encryption. In other words, your images and your files from the moment they're imported to the system, whether that's a scan on a network scanner, scan on a desktop scanner, maybe we bring it in from an email attachment, documents are encrypted at the moment they start transit into the Docuware system. So no one can actually hack or see or get their hands on those images as they're on their way into the cloud. And of course, the data related to those images, the text of the files, the indexing or labels that we put on those files to store them and search for them is also all encrypted. So really no access to data in transit or once it's in the archive system by anyone that shouldn't be. It's also very important we keep things separate. All of our customer systems are totally segregated in the Azure cloud with their own set of data and their own system. You know, it's not like we dump everything in one big bucket. So there is a strict segregation of each customer system and data as well. This particular part of access control I would refer to purely from a cloud management standpoint. The folks at Docuware on the cloud team that run your cloud system and environment, and the folks at Microsoft that help to support that, do not have access to your data or your files. And we do that for a number of different reasons to protect both yourself and us, but we can't see the images or the information about the system. Now, there is an exception to that, and that's when you contact us or when your authorized partner contacts us and asks for help fixing a problem. In a case of a support process, it is entirely possible that we may access the information, but under any other circumstances, other than you requesting it, we can't see the information that you store in the system. This other piece of authorization or access management is the biggest question I get from my customers, and that more relates to how people within the organization, my staff, might access it. You know, do we have a way through some groups and some individual functions of people to control how and what they can see? And that is a big one, especially when we talk about certain types of regulations or compliance. And of course, we want to protect against data loss and protection. You'll see a little, or disaster, you'll see a little bit more information about that in a moment. But suffice it to say, there are multiple copies and multiple redundancies, as well as a pretty solid guaranteed uptime to the system to make sure that you don't lose everything as a whole, as well as individual people removing things that shouldn't be taken out of the system. And we do audits on ourselves. We hire an external company to do penetration tests, as well as periodic tests of our own throughout the year to make sure that the Azure platform and the Docuware application is both very secure. So I did mention it's hosted in Microsoft Azure. That is the partnership that we have developed and has proven to be a very, very excellent relationship there. Obviously, Microsoft brings a lot of tools to the table for security as well. The infrastructure is truly multi-tenant. There's no one in a back room setting up servers or installing software when we activate a new system. It is completely both segregated and also automated. In other words, we could spool up a new Docuware solution in 5 or 10 minutes and have access to it and start kind of playing with what the functions look like and configuring it for your needs. The resources are all self-monitoring and self-adjusting. As you use more of the system or demand more performance, the cloud itself scales up and adds the capabilities that are needed, be it memory or server space or whatever, without any of us having to do anything. In fact, we typically deliver the opening of a document or the viewing of a document in the system in substantially less than 1 second. So very focused on performance. And I just want to mention or touch on very briefly integration. If you're looking at a cloud solution from us, there are absolutely zero limitations versus an on your network or on-premise option as far as how we would integrate or interchange data between Docuware and another system that you use in the business. This might be the finance package, the HRIS system, CRM, whatever it is, but there is no limitations if we need to get some data transfer to occur between those two systems to kind of share or make sure that everything matches as far as the information across the board. We do guarantee a pretty high uptime. I mentioned, of course, the performance or automatically adjusting performance features. And we do keep an audit trail. So everything that's accessed, everything that's touched, everything that's deleted, everything that's modified or edited in any fashion is tracked pretty extensively inside Docuware. And you can also pull that data out in kind of a report format or a spreadsheet if you need to work with the data or provide it to someone else to review. And I did also mention some of the automatic monitoring. In regards to faults or failures, there are a number of fail safes in place, but we will notify you. If anything happens where there might be a few seconds of time where the Docuware system is unavailable, you will get notified, key staff at your organization via email. And what I hear from most of my customers is they get the notification of the issue and the resolution so fast that between the two, they never really realize there's a problem. But we certainly are very, very transparent if something comes up and you need to know about it from a functional standpoint of the system. If I could sum disaster recovery all up, I would do it like this. The top left box you see on the screen right now, or top left circle, I apologize, that's bluish in color, represents the active productive data in the system. In other words, we have now stored in this system about 10 gigabytes of information. That's maybe, I don't know, 20, 30, 40,000 pages worth of stuff. Within the data center that your system operates, we have 2 redundant copies to protect against hardware failure, network outages, power problems, stuff like that. We can flip over to a secondary system immediately. You'll never notice a lapse in service. And then there's also 3 copies of your complete data set in geo-redundant locations, right? One of the data centers is in Virginia, so I imagine some of those 3 extra copies are somewhere out on the West Coast. And we do all that with the highest performance options that are offered or available through Microsoft Azure. Again, we don't want you to wait to find or to store information. And I'll just touch on this compliance stuff a little bit. We make every effort at Docuware to be compliant or to obtain the certifications that we can to support the comfortability of our customers moving forward and trusting us with their images and information. But I would sum this all up very simply in that being compliant with ISO standards or being compliant with HIPAA or perhaps it's pharmaceutical regulations that are specific to that industry, right? GMP. It is a collaborative effort. We can configure the Docuware system to satisfy, support, and/or restrict access in any fashion that you would ask us to support your compliance. But more often than not, that is a collaborative effort between us, our partners, and our end customers to configure the system to function in a fashion that supports access when needed and, of course, restricts access when it should not happen. So at this point, we'll take a little bit of a look at what that might appear like in Docuware. And I am going to start with some of the basics here. What you see up on the screen is a Docuware system on a laptop. This is not the mobile app. And I'm using my access, it looks like Google Chrome. And in this case, I'm signed in as Simon Stone. For the examples today, we're going to take a look at human resources. Just because HR files do have some confidential requirements, and because all of us on the call today deal with that kind of stuff in some form. I hesitate to dive into anything too industry specific in an effort to really make sure this makes sense to everyone. So First thing we will do with Simon is we'll look at a couple of different options to get files into the system. Ultimately, we'll go look at them via a search, and most of those files, being employee files or HR files, will reside in this digital archive called employee files. So if I move over here to this first button, document trays, the workspace down below here opens up two tabs. In fact, Simon, who is my HR director, HR manager, has access to two different document trays. These are really the inbox or the funnel into the system. This is how files get into Docuware. Their first stopping point typically when you add something to the system. So Simon has his own little purse tray and a place that's dedicated for incoming resumes, no matter where they might appear, be dropped off, or delivered, submitted to the organization. In Simon's inbox, we have a couple of files hanging out here. And if I open one up, you'll see it's a resume for Mickey Mouse, and it opens in the viewer over here on the right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here in an effort to stay on topic, but we do have the ability to combine and separate pages, mark up information, write notes on the document, any of those edits you would expect to be able to do on paper or in like an Adobe editor program. All of that is still present. You will not be limited as you move to a digital environment. So files can get in here any which way we would like them to. And if I go over to this resume inbox that's empty right now, it could be as simple as taking a file from my desktop and dragging it into the system. This is also where we deposit scans. So if you have a desktop scanner that sitting beside your laptop or at the home office that has become so important in the last year, you can throw a document in the scanner, scan it, and we will directly deposit it here. You can also scan from any network scanner, like a multifunctional device, big printer. Or what I also very commonly see, and we'll go ahead and remove this Mickey Mouse resume because you're going to see that a couple of times throughout the course of the next 10 minutes. But what I also typically see is things coming in an email. So here I have a new job candidate email that someone has sent to me. This could be the candidate themselves. It could be another department manager. And I have an attachment here that is indeed Mickey Mouse's resume. He must not have heard about the reopening of the Disney World, Disneyland, because he's still out there looking for new employment in light of all the changes. So Mickey, a little behind the times, could probably still go back to Disney World and work, but for now he wants to be a senior accountant with Docuware. So you'll see up here in the ribbon, I have a Docuware button, a direct integration with Outlook, where it places some information over here that I can use. We can also access that from a right click. You'll see down here, store in Docuware with, again, a couple different choices maybe on how we want to handle that email. In this case, I just want the resume to go into that tray. So I'm going to click the button here. And this is one other method or one other way we would import things into the system. If you notice, that email actually deleted itself once I got the pop-up saying it worked correctly. And if we flip back over here to Docuware, you'll see I have a new resume in my inbox. Interestingly, it has a little red tag on it for some reason that wasn't really there when I first put it in. Certainly isn't part of the Word doc. So in an effort to make it as easy as possible to store this new resume into the HR archive, we have run some intelligence on the document and identified most, if not all, of the key criteria automatically to store this file. Let's say hypothetically we missed the email last. We did not capture that for some reason. The method that you use to correct this, and in fact train the confidence level of Docuware so that you will start to see these red colors change to yellow and then green as we are more and more confident with the accuracy of how we automate things. The method to do that, both correct missing information and or train the system for future resumes, is to simply point and click where you find the information on the document. And then we're done storing the resume. This intelligence was designed to read documents that are not the same format or layout, but have the same information all the time, like a vendor invoice or an expense receipt from a store or a resume. or an order or a contract with a customer. There's lots of things in our lives that contain the same, relevant business data, but the format is different. So that's what that's designed to do. And if we go over here and do a search as Mr. Simon Stone, our HR manager, we can see what happened. We go in and search all those records for HR. Now, Simon, as the HR manager, I would like to point out, has access to a couple of different things. A more extensive or detailed search of the digital filing than just employee records. Simon also can manage, as the manager of HR, all the job description templates that we use to post jobs and hire people for different departments within the organization. So if I open up just the employee file search here, you'll see I get presented with a set of data that relates to how I might want to find that information. This could be things like what type of piece of paper did it used to be. So if I'm looking for every possible I-9 in the system, a very quick search will produce 3 documents. Peggy, Simon, and Elizabeth all have I-9 stored in Docuware. If I'm looking for more detailed information, maybe I'm looking for someone by their actual name. You see we have 4 or 5 different choices here, 4 or 5 different people in the system right now, but I'm not sure which one of those folks is actually in the finance department. So perhaps I am looking for only employees in the finance department. And now we are only presented on this drop-down list with 2 people that actually belong to the finance department. And now, of course, I'm retrieving Peggy Jenkins information. In fact, if we do that same search with Simon, maybe we pull all of Peggy's record at once and see what that looks like. So here's a search for the complete record of Peggy, and in fact has 4 items. One is an I-9, one is emergency contact information, W-4, and of course, last but not least, is a performance review for Peggy performed by her boss, Elizabeth. So again, 4 files in here for Peggy. And if we go look at that other individual in the finance department, I'm going to open a new search here. Notice Docuware keeps Peggy open here and gives me a new option to pull up. Let's go ahead and get Peggy's boss up on the screen too. So Elizabeth Cash, simple search produces, oh, she has 5 documents. Looks like Elizabeth took a day off or requested at least a vacation day at some point. Peggy doesn't have that PTO request in here. I guess Peggy never takes vacation is what it comes down to. So if you do a search from a perspective of Simon and you look for Peggy's information or Elizabeth's, you'll see 5 records for Elizabeth, 4 records for Peggy. So let's take a look at that from the end user's perspective, not necessarily the manager of the HR department. If I log out here as Simon, we can go back in as that end user in finance, Peggy Jenkins, and see how it looks and feels from her perspective. So here, Peggy already has a search open for employee files. Of course, if that wasn't open, you could open it through the search button here. And notice she only has one choice, much more restricted options for how I find information. And in fact, if Peggy wanted to cheat, maybe she's curious what Simon makes in HR as the director. You can certainly enter Simon's first and last name here and execute a search, but you get absolutely nothing back. In fact, if we leave this blank, we'll get everything back in the employee files archive, but it will be limited by what Peggy is allowed to see. Now, if you recall, she had 4 files in the system, no day off request, but 4 other items that the HR manager could see. But when Peggy does a blank search and says, give me everything in HR, she only gets one thing back. In other words, Peggy does not get to see Elizabeth, Simon, or anyone else's information in the system. Furthermore, another layer is present where Peggy does not see her other 3 documents for HR. Her hiring paperwork, her W-4, her I-9 are for HR eyes only, But of course, if she wants to look up last year's performance review, maybe it's simply to prepare for this year's performance review, that particular document type is available to her and only hers. So that's one way we can restrict access to what people can see. Now let's take that one more level up and let's look at what Elizabeth sees. Elizabeth is a manager. She's in charge of the finance department, but she certainly is not a member of the HR team. So there's probably an additional mechanism or layer here that would need to be present to make everyone happy. So we log in as Elizabeth. Elizabeth has that same search for employee files already open. And again, to illustrate the point here, we'll just leave it blank, hit the go button. Elizabeth, however, gets 4 things back. And I'm actually going to click here and sort these by name so that we can kind of see a little bit of what's going on. What Elizabeth has at the bottom here is that same performance review that Peggy was just looking at. In other words, Peggy's direct report, her boss is Elizabeth. Now, Elizabeth doesn't have access to any of the other files, any of the emergency contact information or personal confidential stuff for Peggy. But as her supervisor, she absolutely should have access to the performance review. And in fact, she also has access to 2 of her own documents. In this case, she can see also her own performance review, just like Peggy could. And she can also see that day off request that was in there from a couple of years ago when she last took a vacation. And the final thing that Peggy can see is a performance review template. I imagine, or that Elizabeth can see. I imagine Peggy is not the only employee in finance that Elizabeth has. And occasionally we will need to do a new appraisal for a new employee. So Elizabeth has access to her own file, a subset of Peggy's file as appropriate, and some of the standard documents that she might use to do employment related activities for her finance team. Now, let's go back over to our HR manager and take one last look at some of the information that's happened and maybe what has happened in the background to track all of this. So, first thing I'd like to point out is the audit history. If we go into the employee files here and look for some information maybe for Elizabeth, of course, Simon's now going to get more things back. We'll see that that emergency contact is now here. The W4 is now here. And same thing if we do that for Peggy. Now, if you recall, we were looking at Peggy's review, Peggy's appraisal a few times throughout this. And if I right click, you'll see I'm now given access to the history of that document. So on a document by document basis, or as a full audit history in its entirety, this is the document audit trail we're about to look at here, you'll see all kinds of things that happened and were tracked in the background. If we scroll all the way down here, you'll see May 20th at 11:02, Simon opened the file. Did Simon change anything about that document? Well, if we hover over here, we can see that all of the previous values were not changed to any new values. In other words, this is blank because nothing was edited or modified about the document. And if you scroll up here, we can get into some newer stuff like today at 11:30 when Simon opened the document, and today at 11:30 when Elizabeth opened the document, looking at her staff's performance review. And then a few minutes before that, when I was in as Peggy, and we also opened the document. Had we changed something, it would be here. And had we taken a different action, you would get a different item here. Say, for example, Peggy emailed the document. It would say emailed. If we printed the document, it would say printed. So every step, every access point, even something as simple as someone viewing the information, think HIPAA now, can be audited, tracked, and or proven, documented that it did not occur, just like it was not supposed to. So that's the audit history within Docuware. And again, you can pull that across many documents or look individually document by document. But there is another flavor of this I'd like to show you. We'll go in and do a search, one last search as Simon Stone. But in this case, we're actually looking for job descriptions, kind of like that performance review template. These are a set for HR of standard job descriptions for different roles, like vice president of engineering or receptionist. And these are standard templates that HR uses to publish new hiring posting requests and a description of the job. So these are files that are going to change over time. Let's just say, for example, for this top one, for a vice president of engineering, that we realized one of the items, one of the responsibilities or qualifications that we need from a vice president of engineering has changed. So if I right click and choose edit, you'll see this document open in its original format in Microsoft Word. Of course, I haven't licensed my product, so we get an extra little pop-up. And so when you access live documents, Word, Excel, PowerPoints, whatever that might be, it's as simple as working with them from your desktop. And I'm going to change this to must have experience with AutoCAD or related CAD software, because we sure want our VP of engineering to be able to read like blueprints and drawings correctly. That might make sense. So we close, save, and behind the scenes, Docuware is tracking not just the access history, but the changes that occurred to all those documents. So if you see here, I have a version 1 that was originally put in the system by HR admin, and it still has the old text here, and it's actually out of date. If I have version 2, current version, you'll notice must have experience with AutoCAD or related CAD software. So as files are accessed and reviewed, you are always, as the end user doing the search, presented with that most current active version. But if this was a mistake or it needs reversed, we can do that with 2 clicks. 1 with the right mouse button to pull up this menu, and 2 here to revert this to the current version. And if we go back here to that standard search now, you'll see that, again, the requirement has been removed and we're back to that current version only showing to the end user. In the interest of time, I am going to wrap up here, but I want to put 2 little pins in this before I turn things back over to Nicole. First of all is audits. Now we're looking at a search right now. In fact, this is a search for all of the job descriptions. So let's flip back over to this other search for Peggy that I still have hanging out here, because it's a little bit more relevant. Let's say an auditor comes in and says, give me all your I-9s, not just for Peggy, but for anyone. When you have the appropriate data on the screen, you can export that with this little ellipsis or ... down here. We call that a Docuware request. When I click this, it will open up, assemble all the files into a container, and ask you where you would like to save the download. This is a really handy thing to throw on a flash drive to give to the auditor so that they are not coming to you asking for more information and searching. They can perform all of these type of search functions right here on the flash drive as a read-only function to see all the files you just handed them. We also have the ability to automatically delete documents. And again, in the interest of time, I'm going to hold off on showing that, but suffice it to say that if we have retention schedules in place from the organization, They might be based on other factors, but I do commonly see them based on age. So if we look at some of these job descriptions that might be really, really old, there is absolutely a method within Docuware to manage and remove that for you automatically, thereby limiting anything that might be hanging out there that could cause a problem in the future. And we would do that one of two ways. We can automate that in the background where a process runs and simply removes all these documents on a schedule, right? Every night, every week, every year. What most of my customers prefer, however, is a human decision. The ability to have a stamp like this that says delete and allows me as the end user to trigger a request for deletion. Either can happen, and in many cases, we combine or blend those two functions to deliver the right outcome. So that's all I have for you from a Docuware standpoint today, and I'm going to do my best to turn it back over to Nicole.
You can see on the screen, we have a case study where, we have a real life user, a pharmaceutical company that uses Docuware to meet the good manufacturing practices compliance standards, and they're able to do that efficiently and in a user-friendly manner. So definitely check out the email later I'll send that has a link to that full case study. So, we hope you learned and took away a lot from Nate's presentation and demo. We hope you take the next step with Docuware, learn more, see more in-depth features so you can grow and thrive in the future. We hope you don't, stay on path 2 where you're not doing anything, you're still struggling with manual processes, maybe, risking your company's data and documents. So, it's easy to get started. Take the next step, request a personalized demo at docuware.com/demo. Email us anytime with any thoughts or questions at contact.us@docuware.com. Or if you're already working with an authorized Docuware partner, definitely reach out to them to get started with the next steps.